Welcome to the Word Potions podcast. I'm Christopher King, and this is Strangers at Bars Sometimes Bite, Part 10. "Do not take the shot until I give the signal," whispered Lazuli. "I'll take the shot when I feel the time is right," Keela whispered back fiercely. We lay on a hidden alcove halfway up the cavern wall. It was a residence that was only halfway through completion. The advantage lay in the fact that it sat facing the Magistra portal gate. I scanned the capital city of Magistra, taking in the sight. It was similar to Elhaven, but on a much grander scale. The walls of the cavern were filled with different terrace levels, with stairs being cut into the rock leading to the different terraces. Numerous doorways had been cut into the rock wall, on each terrace providing a living space for all the inhabitants of Magistra. People came and went about their business. We sat on the highest terrace, where nobody had as yet moved into. I turned my gaze back to the great gate. A procession of nobles appeared out of the swirling blue energy of the great portal, and a full cohort of gate guards fanned out, securing the area from potential threats. From our vantage point, I couldn't quite make out people's facial expressions. However, the energy with which the guards moved alerted me to the fact that the High Lord would be appearing soon. I reflected back on how we'd arrived here. "Several of my thralls have already infiltrated the capital city as beggars and refugees. When the time comes to strike, they will help us." Lazuli pointed to a map of Magistra that lay on the stone table. I sat and watched as him and his sister bickered over certain details. Lazuli claimed to be the leader, but Keela seemed to be the one that the Elvar actually liked. I laughed to myself, as yet another seemingly easy brainstorming session turned into a bickering match. "The western gate is obviously the best point of penetration," said Lazuli. Keela shook her head, pointing to a couple of X's that had been marked on the map. "Not with those two overlook perches. We'll be spotted in minutes." "Not if we go one at a time. They won't suspect a thing." Keela huffed and pointed to the opposite side of the city. "The eastern gate has less overlook perches, therefore less opportunity to be spotted." I stood up and walked to the table. "Look, the only reason I'm going to help you is because Castor will kill me if he finds me, and I'd like to go back to living in Elhaven, and perhaps someday seeing the surface again. The faster you two decide on a plan, the faster that will happen for me. Plus, we'll get to taste some blood." "Stop talking in my head, Blade." I waited a moment for the voice to quiet, then continued. "As you told me, Castor will be gone for a few more days, then we'll return to Magistra. You just need to catch him out in the open, right?" "Correct," growled Lazuli. "And you will be doing the killing?" I asked, turning to Keela. "Yes, long-range death is my specialty," she said, panting, the rifle leaned up against the table. "Okay, what if you take him out just as he steps through the gate? He's not going to be traveling by pool like we did, and if their gate is anything like the others, there's going to be a wide open space to accommodate the gate." Lazuli began pacing around the table. "Yes, all of that is obvious, but we need to be inside the city and in position before Castor arrives, which brings us full circle." I felt the tension in my chest and I took a deep breath to clear it. I need a break. I walked out of the small war room and up the short tunnel leading to the large cavern outside. I could smell the fresh scent of tree and foliage. It always calmed me to touch the soft bark of the trees. "Tired of listening to them fight?" I looked around and spotted the speaker walking towards me from the riverbank. Aegon was a small diminutive Elvar that limped as he walked, and his left hand curled into his chest in an odd, crumpled fashion. Aegon's mind was perhaps the sharpest one I'd ever met. Back on Earth, he'd be seen as a genius. I rubbed my forehead and sighed before replying. "Yeah, they're at it again. At this rate, I'll never get to go home." "I'm sure you will get there. It may take time and patience, but in the end, I'm sure you'll find a way to make it happen." "I'm sorry if I'm being nosy, but what happened to your arm?" I said, gesturing to his deformed appendage. "Been like this ever since I was born. I've never been very gifted physically, but I was lucky that Evelys gifted me up here." Aegon pointed up to his head. "I've been meaning to ask someone, but what are those floating lights?" I asked, looking at the many orbs floating around the cavern, giving light to the area. Those are Magus lights. We conjure them here so they don't have to use any sort of electricity. Who conjures them? I asked. Me and a few other people, was Aegon's reply. Let me show you. Aegon turned his good hand face up and spoke a few words. My ears popped as the air pressure around me dropped for a second, then restored. A light slowly formed in Aegon's hand, and he gently tossed it into the air. It sped upward, then stopped, and hung just under the roof of the cavern. Whoa, that's amazing. How did you do that? Just a matter of visualizing what you want with the correct words. Want to try? Of course, I replied. Excitement washed over me, and I placed my hand just like Aegon did. Alright, repeat these words, then visualize a ball of light forming in your hand. Aegon told me the words, and I repeated them. Fayat Lunks. I concentrated as hard as I could, but I didn't feel a thing, and nothing changed. I don't think it's working. I looked at Aegon, and he looked back curiously before gesturing to my head. May I touch you? Go ahead, I replied. Aegon held my forehead in his hand, closed his eyes. After a few seconds, he opened them again and looked back at me. I can't sense a thing in your mind. It's as damp and dark as this cave is. I'm sorry, Hampton, but I don't think you'll ever be able to cast. I looked away, trying to fight the gnawing disappointment in my chest. You don't need silly magic, Hampton. You have me. I don't need you, Blade. Shut up. It's fine, I said. I've gotten this far without magic. I can get through this without it. Aegon nodded and began walking away. Sometimes a disability can turn out to be your greatest strength, Hampton. Remember that. I walked back to the war room and found Lazuli and Keela still talking through the day's strategy. The male and female Elvar waved me over as soon as I entered. Hampton, if we position ourselves here, Lazuli pointed to a part of Magistra on the map. Do you think you can protect Keela until she takes the shot? There's a good chance that our position will be compromised when she starts shooting, and I'd like it if I didn't lose her. Yeah, I can do that, but I'm kind of worried about the blade. If I go into a slaying trance, I'm capable of going after her just as much as whatever attacks us on our vantage point. I glanced down at the blade on my side. Light bounced off the handle as if the blade was winking at me. I've been thinking about that, and perhaps Aegon will be able to give you a hand. He has much more experience with the mind than most people here. I nodded, then paused as something else crossed my mind. What happens when you kill the High Lord caster and announce yourself as leader? Wouldn't the other Elvar just execute you and place the next in line to lead them? That's not how things work here. However, I have been wooing certain high-ranking Elvar to my side. Most of them agree with me. They won't openly support my claim as long as Caster is alive. However, were he to meet an unfortunate end, then I can assume the position of High Noble and fix what Caster has broken. Lazuli pulled out the small black crystal Thurtai had given him. We won't be needing this. Once I assume leadership of the Elvar, I will lead my people and crush the evil Felcher and the damned deity. Sure, that's fine, but what about Thurtai and his clan? They are offering us their assistance. Undoubtedly, we could use the help. However, no one can ever trust a Felcher, and were I to crush them, it would solidify my position as the High Noble caster, leaving no doubt that I was the right fit. Okay, I'll just hold on to this then. I grabbed the dark crystal and put it into the pocket of my clothes. Let's go find Aegon, said Lazuli as he walked past me toward the entrance of the war room. We found Aegon sitting underneath a tree playing a pan flute with one hand. He finished up the tune as we approached, then got to his feet, greeting us with a smile. Hello again, Hampton. What can I do for you? Hampton needs some help with the named blade of his. It's giving him trouble controlling the sword. He needs to be able to wield it without losing control. Certainly, sir. May I see the blade, Hampton? I nodded and unbuckled the belt holding the sword to my hip. I was afraid to directly touch the sword, so I held the sword by the belt as I passed it over to him. Aegon fearlessly grabbed the handle of the blade. He froze for a few minutes as soon as his hand clamped around the handle. Sweat began to gather on his forehead, and he trembled intermittently. After a few minutes, Aegon let go of the sword, setting it down at his feet. There's a strong soul in there, that's for sure. I can't suppress it or lock it away, so I'll need to practice resisting its influence. I can help. Here, hold my hand. Aegon adjusted the folds of his robe as he sat down, then gestured for me to have a seat as well. I took a seat next to Aegon, crossing my feet as he did. Lazuli excused himself, saying he had to go make some preparations for our infiltration. Extending his deformed hand left toward me. Are you ready? This can be tumultuous. I took Aegon's left hand, making sure not to squeeze too hard. He looked at me one more time, so I nodded back in affirmation. He reached toward the blade, and even before he touched it, I could feel the soul's influence. The previous impulses to pick up the sword and slice the nearest person appeared in my mind, but with Aegon stopping most of the blade's compulsion, I was able to familiarize myself with Kilzar's mind. Kilzar's mind had a sharp, thorny feeling to it. Tonight we slay. No, I commanded back as loudly as I could. Kilzar's mind recoiled slightly, then grew hot with anger. It redoubled its mental compulsions against me, willing me to take hold of the sword and stab Aegon. I struggled for a moment, then refused again, sending another mental jab at the blade. Without Aegon's help, I would have been hopelessly overcome, enslaved to the blade's lust for death. Even as we mentally struggled back and forth, I knew that Kilzar was more powerful than me. Aegon acted as a sort of dam, holding back the full force of the blade's will and only allowing a little bit of it through. He abruptly let go of the sword, and I could see blood streaming out of his nose. That fearsome mind. There must have been a host of people to capture it. I need to rest. I too felt tired. Not physically, but the mental strain left me barely able to concentrate on things, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I'll be back in a bit. Aegon got up and stumbled off. I lay down and stared up into the branches of the tree. Your spirit is strong, and for that you have my respect. How can you talk to me? I'm not touching you. We've spilled blood together. We are forever connected. Why do you want me to kill so badly? I asked it. With each life that passes the barrier, we grow more powerful. As of yet, you are still weak and mentally unready. You kill Boggle with ease because they are less sentient in your eyes. They are as a bug that has wandered into your home, ripe for the squishing. But have you ever wondered what goes through their minds at the point of time when a blade shears their neck in two? What about the Elvar you killed? I couldn't control myself, I thought desperately. I don't really control your actions. I just amplify the desire that is already there. At the very least, be honest with yourself. Lying to oneself is a form of mental weakness. Deep down, you like the feeling of power. Believe it or not, I'm just trying to keep us both alive and make us stronger. I didn't like having Kilzar on my mind, so I imagined a wall between me and the sword. For a second, our thought connection was broken, but Kilzar smashed through the wall, and for a moment, the visage of a grinning creature appeared in my mind. You'll need to do better than that to keep me out, boy. I tried containing Kilzar inside of a box, but he put a door into the side and stepped out. I tried encasing myself in a box, but he just pushed me off a cliff, and I had to abandon the mental construct or fall into a deep mind chasm. All of this only felt like moments, but when I awoke, Aegon was shaking me. I'd fallen asleep, clutching the handle of the blade. Fear lanced through me, and I dropped the sword as if it had burned me. Got a little careless, did we? Fuck you, Kilzar. I foresee plenty of bloodshed in our future. I can help you when the time comes. All you need to do is ask. You don't want to help me. By helping you, I help myself. What is your deepest desire? I probed at Kilzar as soon as I thought it, and a single word echoed around my head. Freedom. A myriad of emotions followed the word, striking me hard and fast. Rage, sorrow, helplessness, loneliness. I mentally recoiled from the onslaught of emotion. Kilzar sat silent, more silent than I'd ever felt from it. I buckled the sword back onto my waist. Aegon watched me. You're still here? Well, no matter. It's time for bed. Here, let me help you to your bedroll. I stood to my feet and swayed silently. My head throbbed with a headache, but mercifully, Kilzar stayed silent. I stood to my feet and followed Aegon to some bedrolls laid out underneath the tree. I curled up into my roll and let my eyes flutter closed. The last thing I saw was Aegon slowly turning his head in the air, as if he was turning back a knob. The Magus lights dimmed, and people began making their way to their sleeping bags. A figure stepped through the portal, wearing a long robe and golden cuffs on his wrists. His face was covered by a mask, only allowing slits for eyes. Keela sighted onto the figure with her rifle. She placed her finger on the trigger, but Lazuli hissed a warning to her. "Wait, stop. That's a decoy." "And how can you possibly know that?" snapped back Keela. "He's wearing a mask." "I know it's hard to tell, but one thing about the way he walks isn't right." "Could have stubbed his toe on the other side of the portal," I suggested quietly. "Really? That's your best guess?" replied Lazuli in disbelief. "No, that's not it. This imposter is slightly shorter. He's close, but I can just tell something is off." "This High Lord sure goes to a lot of trouble not to get killed," I said as I watched the figure with golden cuffs walk across the square. "Yeah, because he knows I'm after him." "Which seems like a mistake to let someone know you're planning on assassinating them," I retorted. "I'm beginning to think Castra's already through the gate. Maybe he exchanged places with the guard. We need to get a closer look." "I can help you." "Not now, Kilzar." "Stay with Keela, Hampton." Lazuli got to his feet, then began making his way toward the terrace staircase. We followed Lazuli with our eyes as he casually strode down the staircase, nodding to people as he passed them onto the lower levels. He made his way to where the procession of nobles was walking. "Something's wrong." "God, you can never keep to yourself, Kilzar." "Fine, I tried to help the civil way. Don't say I didn't warn you." An intense burst of fear lanced through my mind, and I cringed looking around. "What is it?" asked Keela. "Something's wrong," I gasped. "Oh, Evelis, you're right." She was looking through her scope at a point not too far from Lazuli. She handed me the gun, and I peered through. A group of 4 Elvar in ranger garb were making a direct line towards Lazuli. "What do we do?" I asked. "You go down there, and I'll cover you from up here." "That doesn't sound great," I replied. "Sounds great to me," replied Kilzar in my head. "Go," commanded Keela. I jumped to my feet and began racing around the terrace toward the stairs. I looked back to where Keela was, but she just waved me on. I sprinted down the stairs, pushing people out of my way. I was almost to the ground floor. I just reached the stairs leading from the second to the first, when I spotted the rangers converging on Lazuli, mere feet from his position. "He's done for," said a low, deep voice next to me. I started and glanced to my side, casually leaned against the railing of the second floor terrace, watching the scene unfolding below.
"Nobody in or out while the High Lord travels," stated the guard stationed at the entrance to Magistra.
I froze, unsure of what to do. I glanced up at the overlook perch containing a single Elvar. He held a gun which was pointed between my eyes. The guard glanced at me.
"Did you hear me, Half-Being?"
"Yes," I replied. "It's just extremely important that I get inside before the High Lord arrives. I have urgent communique about the Felch's movements." The guard glanced around and seemed to think for a moment.
"Okay, but you'll have to take an escort with."
The guard I had been talking with sagged forward. A half-Elvar with crazy red eyes stood behind him holding a bloody club. Inwardly I cringed. This wasn't how I wanted to get into Magistra, but I supposed it'd have to do. I glanced up at the overlook perch. The guard had dropped his rifle and a tiny dart was protruding from his neck. Keela stowed the blow dart tube as she walked up. Lazuli and Keela fell into step behind me as I entered the city. The floor of the cavern was wide, open, and bare. The only structure sitting in the floor of the cavern was the great gate leading from Magistra to Elhaven. It stood in the middle of the cavern, almost touching the roof. A crowd of people filled the space, waiting for a chance to see the High Lord Caster. I allowed Lazuli to take the lead and followed him to a staircase leading up to the second floor terrace. It was marked with the letter E. I was about to rush down the stairs when each of the rangers suddenly went down. 4 different ragged Dreadalis had grabbed the rangers from behind and sank their teeth into their necks. Lazuli noticed the scuffle near him and saw what was happening. He glanced back toward the east terrace. Our eyes met when he saw the guard I was standing next to, and his eyes widened. He began frantically pushing his way through the crowd of people toward us.
"This has been fun, but I do believe it's time to end this game,"
said the guard on the terrace next to me. It slowly dawned on me. "You're a caster," I said.
"That's High Lord Caster to you,"
he said with an icy tone in his voice, as if he disapproved of my very existence. I began to draw my sword, but I felt a pinch in the side of my neck. I took a step toward Caster, but my foot grew 10 times as heavy as it normally was. The same thing happened to my arms. My vision began to swim. I tried to force myself to move, but my body just wouldn't do as I commanded. I fell and was caught by someone. The last thing I heard before blacking out was Keela's voice. "We will have Lazuli in custody before too long, High Lord." Thank you for listening to the Word Potions podcast. Tune back in next week for the next episode. If you like what you heard, consider subscribing, leaving a like, or sending us a message with your thoughts. Have a great day.